Now it's working. Apologies, everyone. Thank you for joining. There was a weird glitch when we tried to start this webinar the first time, so I really appreciate everyone's patience. I'll get started quickly with our housekeeping remarks to respect everyone's time. So welcome, everyone. My name is Claire Ladd, and I'm the Programs and Services Manager at the Massachusetts Nonprofit Network, or MNN. Just a few quick housekeeping items before we dig into the webinar. The recording and slides from today's program will be emailed to you afterwards, so please keep an eye on your email for that. If you have any questions for the presenters, you can submit them via the Q&A function during the webinar, and there will be a lot of time to answer questions. If you have any questions for me about MNN or anything like that, feel free to drop those in the chat and I will keep an eye on it. I also just want to give a little background about us here at MNN. Our goals are to strengthen the nonprofit sector through advocacy, public awareness, and capacity building. And we offer regular webinars in partnership with our affiliate members as part of these capacity building efforts. So please stay tuned for future webinar topics. Our efforts are made possible by our more than 600 member organizations. So thank you to those of you who are members. And if you have not yet joined but would like to take advantage of the member benefits, please visit massnonprofitnet.org/join to find out more. Today's webinar is titled From Vision to Victory, Modeling Your Nonprofit Strategic Roadmap, and it's presented by Billy Reardon and Joe Lafortune of Insource Services. So I will hand it over to our presenters to get started.
Thanks, Claire. As she mentioned, I'm Billy Reardon, and this is my colleague, Joe Lafortune. We are both senior finance and accounting managers at Insource Services. Just a very brief about us. We are a finance, HR, data solutions, and IT consulting firm based in Massachusetts. And Joe and I, I'm sure you can tell by our titles, are in the finance area. So today, we're going to discuss one of the most essential tools in any organization, the strategic plan. So you might be thinking, oh, great, another document that we're just going to put together and sit on the shelf. But we want to challenge that perception right from the start. A true strategic plan is a little bit more than just a document. It's kind of the heartbeat of the organization. So we're going to go over a few slides on what it is. So we're going to start by saying that the strategic plan is really a roadmap for organizational success. I use the anecdote. Would you jump in a car and just drive across the country, without having a plan or a route mapped out? Most likely no. Some adventurers probably would. So the same thing, it's the same with your nonprofit. You don't want to just, dive in without any plan. It's basically the GPS for your journey ahead. It was going to tell you where you are now, where you want to go, and most importantly, how you're going to get there. It can transform your just visions and ideas into more concrete pathways. So without this roadmap, organizations can find themselves driving in circles, wasting precious time, energy, and resources. But what makes it truly powerful is it's not just the destination. It's about understanding the terrain you're going to navigate, what potential roadblocks you might encounter, and any alternate routes that could become available if your original plan or route becomes blocked. The next thing we're going to discuss is making sure you align it with your priorities. Every organization, regardless of sector, has limited resources. Limited resources meaning time, money, personnel, or equipment. The question isn't whether you have constraints, it's how effectively you work with them. So its strategic plan forces you to make hard choices about what matters most. So should employee X be focusing on this, or will their time be spent better focusing on something else that will push you towards your goals? So a real world example. So imagine if you're running a nonprofit with $1 million budget, you could spread that money over 20 different initiatives, any number really. Or you could make the decision to focus on 3 to 5 high impact programs that will truly advance your mission. It can help make decisions based on data, stakeholder input, and clear criteria, not just, gut feelings or whoever talks the loudest in meetings, if you want to say. Um, it also helps you align your priorities. The tendency to say yes to everything is easy. Um, so this will help you align what you say yes to your priorities, every dollar spent, every hour that's invested to help you push you closer to your goals. Next, we'll talk about the key components and assumptions. We'll talk about this in a little bit more detail later in the webinar. Um, Typically, a strategic plan has several essential elements. So first, you have your mission statement, your reason for existing. Then comes your vision, where you want to go in the future. And these are also supported by your core values, which guide how you'll behave along the way. Next, you'll find your strategic goals. Um, Usually, I mean, obviously, depending on the size of your organization, this number can vary. 3 to 5 major objectives that will move you from your current state to where you envision yourself in the future. Under each goal, you'll have specific strategies and tactics, complete with measurable outcomes, timelines, and assigned responsibilities. But here's something crucial that people overlook, the assumptions. Every strategic plan, because if we're talking about, planning out 3 to 5 years, you're not going to know the state of the world, or even your organization in 3 to 5 years. So you need to make assumptions about your market, your funding, your competition, the regulatory environment, and so on. The best strategic plans state these explicitly so you can monitor them and adjust them if they, I was going to say prove incorrect, but if something changes. And an example I always use is imagine a company or a nonprofit, making a 5-year strategic plan in 2019. I am sure they did not envision that the following year the world was going to shut down with the pandemic. So you always want to be able to state your assumptions and adjust when things happen. The next thing we will talk about is the strategic plan helps guide your decision making at all levels of the organization. This is kind of where it moves in from theory to daily practice. So when faced with a new opportunity or challenge, your strategic plan should help answer key questions. Does this align with our priorities? Will it move us closer to our goals? Can we resource it without compromising our core strategies? We've seen organizations transform their cultures using their strategic plan as a decision maker filter. Instead of having, lengthy debates about every new idea, they can quickly assess, like, how does this fit into our strategic direction? That doesn't mean you never pursue something unexpected that comes up. But it does help make those decisions more consciously, understanding like trade-offs that could be involved. It also empowers people throughout the organization. When everyone understands at the organization the strategic directions, they can make better decisions in their daily work without constantly needing approval from above. So it can create both efficiency and engagement. And finally, we'll talk about this as well a little bit more later. It's a living document. That's probably the most important thing we will mention today. Too many organizations and nonprofits go through these elaborate planning processes, create beautiful documents, and then once they're done, they just file them away until, say, next year when they do another review. That's really not what we're talking here. So the strategic plan breathes with your organization. It's reviewed regularly at whatever level you decide, monthly, quarterly, and it is updated when things change significantly. So think of it like a fitness plan. Like you're not just going to create a workout routine and never adjust it as you evolve. So it's a similar idea to that. The next few slides we're going to talk about is how to model a strategic plan and why you should model a strategic plan. First, we always recommend starting with a SWOT analysis of your nonprofit or organization. So SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So looking at each of those four, so for strengths, like what are you good at? Like what is something that you're better at than anyone else? What unique resources do you have? Maybe it's your team, your technology, or your market position. I think the toughest one, and sometimes it's good to ask outsiders this question for weaknesses. Be brutally honest. So it's not just identifying like what you're bad at or being negative. Where do we fall short? What do our competitors do better? Um, for opportunities, you want to look outward. What trends can you capitalize on? Like, are you underserved in any markets? Are there any new technologies you can leverage? And for threats, these are external factors that can harm your business. Any external like governmental regulations, any economic downturns? Um, is there any emerging competitors coming up in the market? The biggest key here is just be honest and thorough. Gather inputs from all level of your organization. Your frontline employees often see things that leadership misses because they're usually in the weeds on a day-to-day basis. Next, you need to define your vision, your mission, and your values. These aren't just feel-good statements that just hang on your wall. Consider them like your North Star for every decision that you make. Your vision statement answers where are we going? It should be inspirational and aspirational. Your mission statement explains why do we exist? What do we do? Who do we serve? It's a little bit more specific than your vision. And then your values are non-negotiables. Your non-negotiables. They define how you'll behave on your journey. So if integrity is your value, then cutting corners would be off the table, as an example. These three elements must align. When they do, they can create a powerful foundation for decision making and morale at any organization. Next is you need to set your strategic goals and objectives. Now we translate your strategic goals and objectives. Think of it where the rubber meets the road. Strategic goals are broad, long term, and they aim to move your vision forward. They typically span 3 to 5 years. So, for example, it can be we want to go into two new markets next year. Objectives break down these into specific measurable targets. So it's a good idea to follow the SMART framework. So SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. Um, so for example, instead of saying you just want to increase donations, say something more specific, like I want to increase donations by 20% over the next 18 months. The trick, though, is not to limit yourself. Like, think of 3 to 5 goals. Too many, though, you can lose focus. And for each goal, you want to develop 3 to 4 objectives. And then this creates a clear hierarchy and prevents like organizational ADD, meaning trying to do everything and accomplishing nothing. The next part is where we talk about as the picture states, where we want to stop talking and start doing. Each initiative that you make should have a clear owner, a clear timeline, a clear budget, the resources that are going to be allocated to it and are required. So for instance, if your objective is to increase customer satisfaction, maybe implement a customer referral program or expanding your customer service team, or your sales team. The best action plans are broken down into milestones as well. So this can create momentum and allow for quick course corrections. Remember, a strategic plan isn't carved in stone. It's a living document that adapts to changing circumstances. Establishing KPIs, key performance indicators, and metrics, because you can't manage what you can't measure. Choose KPIs that directly link to your objectives. If your goal is customer satisfaction, don't measure revenue. Measure like a net promoter score or a customer retention rate or support ticket resolution. But beware of too many metrics. Think of the ones that are the leading ones based on your mission. Not just lagging indicators that tell you what you already know, and make sure that everyone understands what they're being measured on. And celebrate wins. If some of the KPIs come back successful, celebrate those. If any are missed, don't just think of them as negative. Figure out like what happened, how can we fix this, and adjust. And then the implementation and review process. You want to review this periodically, whether it be monthly, quarterly. I would say quarterly would be the most to go. And like I said, celebrate wins, analyze misses, and adjust. So the strategic plan is not just a one-time event, it's an ongoing process. So now let's take a deeper dive and look to where to start.
Great. Thanks, Billy. So we want to talk about actually building out the strategic plan and what are the assumptions that we have to make and how do we start thinking of these assumptions in actionable manners. The first thing we need to learn, though, is what type of nonprofit are you? There's nonprofits out there that have a relatively fixed revenue base. A lot of those would be, nonprofits that have memberships or that, provide assessment fees to different members and that sort of thing. And they really need to plan their expenses around a relatively similar revenue generation every year. That means that your revenue, there's not a ton of assumptions that we need to make there aside from how many members do you expect to have and those retention rates of members, but the expenses will be a lot more involved. And in many other nonprofits, we are funded by grants, we're funded by foundations, we're funded by individual contributors, and we need to work out both a plan for our expenses and our revenue and tie them together in a way that we will be successful for our coming years and at worst achieving a break-even ratio when we get to the end of the year. First, we're going to talk about our revenue assumptions. So we're going to go through all these assumption categories. We're going to talk about revenue, our cost structure, our external environment, our operations, and our strategic assumptions. And we're going to start with our revenue. So with revenue assumptions, we want to look at where's our money coming from. We have different metrics that we need to keep track of. Billy's already mentioned a few of them. Majorly, the donor retention rates. Do we see recurring donors all the time? Do we have any risks within our major donors of anyone aging out? Do we have any risks in our major donors because we have, one or two or three individuals who tend to provide a lot of the operating revenue for the organization? And, we want to start planning how we can mitigate that and increase our donor base so we're not so reliant on a couple of individuals. Do we have new donor acquisition goals set up? If we do, what are those goals? What's the minimum we expect to achieve? What would be really strong? How's our board involvement with our donor acquisition? Can we ask our board to help provide us maybe a list of fundraising sources? I've seen a lot of organizations do that with great success. We want to track our growth and loss of all of our funding streams as well, specifically for our grants and our foundation support that comes to us in the form of awards. A lot of those have end dates to them. They might, be something that we can have for 1 year. Maybe it's a 3-year agreement. Maybe it's even longer than that. We want to understand when those end dates are, what those funding cycles look like. Are they renewable? Do we expect to receive them again? Or are they going to be one time and it's really attached to specific program work? Just all things that we need to consider. A lot of nonprofits have an endowment or other sources of investments. We want to consider how we plan to use those funds. Do we want to let that sit where it is and let it continue to grow so that when we have a downturn in the future, we have something reliable that we can use to keep ourselves running, even though the economy turns? Or is it something that we're trying to grow the nonprofit and we want to pull from those investments in order to help stimulate the growth of the organization? There's also many nonprofits that have other income sources. I've seen solar panels and other stuff that can provide a few $1,000s a month to a nonprofit, which in the short term isn't huge, but over the course of time, it ends up adding up. So always consider, are there other sources that your organization has that you can rely upon? Then we're going to start talking about our cost structure assumptions. So for our cost structure, all nonprofits fall into three major categories of costs. It's either going to be a program cost, general administrative cost, or it's a fundraising cost. In all three of these pillars, we're going to have personnel, and we need to always be considering what our headcount's going to be. Are we planning to grow? Are we planning to lose? This is where the funding cycles for our grants come in. If we expect something to not renew, did we have to hire in order to fulfill our obligations to that grant? Or is it something that we, didn't need to hire for? We used contractors, so maybe it's not such a big loss, but now we're going to have a much lower contractor cost. Could also be involved with partnerships or other things like that as well. We want to look at our program delivery costs. Is our programs recurring? Are they something that we plan to do for the rest of time? Does the delivery of that program cost change? Does it include, are we estimating for our inflation? Just, the cost of paper goes up. So now it just is more impactful when we need to provide documentation to our clients. Just general inflation. Travel is a big one that can always come up for organizations as well. Sometimes there's a period where we need more travel than we ever had before. And we always want to consider how we're using outside consultants or partnerships to the best of our ability. Are there other nonprofits that have an aligned mission and a partnership with them would work out in both of our favors? It's always nice to see when two nonprofits get together to achieve a shared goal. For our general admin, we always want to be considerate of our overhead ratio, which really determines how much we can afford in admin. When we think of a nonprofit's cost structure, we like to think of general admin as a percentage of program costs. So the first thing we should really plan out as a nonprofit is our program costs. And then based on that, we should say, all right, we expect to need this much percentage to cover general admin. And how does general admin fit into that percentage? What can we actually afford there? That's going to be all of our operational staff. If we have to rent a facility, if there's other facility costs, the software that the organization uses, if it's not program related. A lot of times there's grants out there that we can receive that will help us bolster our IT infrastructure and software. So sometimes that is something that could be covered kind of from a program perspective. Things that never go away, like audit and legal, we need to be covering those. And if we have any staff events, are another thing that we want to look at. And then lastly, we have our fundraising that we need to always be considerate of. So do we host donor cultivation events? Do we have a grant writer in-house that helps us build out new programs? Do we outsource grant writing? Is it something that we need to build up for program awareness just to get our name out there, more visibility so that we can try to drive up our donor base? It's a lot of considerations that need to be made for fundraising. Do we have a marketing plan in place that we expect to reach out using social media or other avenues? Just something that we need to consider as well. And we'll move on to the external environment assumptions. External environment, we all know we are in a world right now where, yes, we knew when this president was elected that things were going to be tough, but we could not tell exactly what that meant. Things are becoming more clear over time, but there's been a ton of regulatory changes. There's been a ton of economic conditions that are, just because of the administration that we have now, it's changed for nonprofits everywhere. So it's something that we need to be keeping in mind at all times, right? How is that going to play out for us? Is there risks involved with that? If there are risks, how do those risks affect what we're trying to do as an organization and our mission in particular? Beyond just regulatory and political changes, we also want to consider, our competition that we have. For a nonprofit, this is generally competition for grants. There's not usually one single organization applying for a specific grant. It's generally something that we have to put a proposal together for, write it up, how we're going to use the funds, exactly what the accomplishments are going to be, and how that aligns with our organizational mission. Has that environment changed for you? Do we have new players that might try to compete for these funds? Have the barriers on the funds that we typically get been lowered? And now just because it's going to be easier for other organizations to apply, it's going to be more competitive for us to receive those funds. Always something that we need to consider. And then we also want to consider our economic conditions in terms of our donors. Do they still have confidence in our organization? Does the giving capacity of our donors still exist and resonate with them? Do we have a lot of turnover rate in our donors? Do we have a lot of volatility in who's giving and when? It's all things that we want to just make sure we're considering and putting into our strategic plan and actually building out the numbers based on some reasonable set of data. We can move on to our operational assumptions. So operational assumptions, this is where you want to think about your programs as a whole. What's the scale of our program? Do we plan to increase the scale of a particular program or reduce it over time? Is there anything that we can do from a software perspective that will help us improve our data gathering or our ability to produce results for that program? Are all of our programs successful on their own? Do we have anything that is actually a cost burden on the organization? I've seen that happen, and I've seen that make sense for organizations where, yes, the program isn't necessarily funding itself, but it's key to their mission, and it helps the rest of the organization as a whole. So as long as you understand that and know that this isn't necessarily going to fund itself, but we have other sources that can cover the gap, it's still okay to do that sort of thing. We also want to consider our staff capacity. Did our workload increase? Are we growing our programs faster than we expected? So now we need to hire some new heads. And then how is our administration going to be able to keep up with the scale of our program work? If program work keeps growing, we're going to need a back end that can help support that as well. So we want to keep that in consideration, as well as if the programs are winding down and things are slowing for you, do we have too much on the back end? And we need to make some tough decisions there. Working capital and cash flow is massive when you consider your 3 to 5 year plan. Do we have anything that we need to be purchasing from a capital perspective? Do we have enough cash to cover our growth? Do we need to bring more in for investments? How are our investments doing over time? Do we need to reconsider what we're invested in order to grow those funds faster? Are we in a position where we would prefer our investments to be in safer places that we can guarantee a return rather than putting it into a risky place in the market? Another thing for consideration is how your investments are aligned with your mission goals. I've seen a lot of nonprofits have a investment policy that is aligned with their own personal mission so that they're investing in the right places. For our capital expenses, do we have a building? Do we need to renovate said building? Is space getting old? Do we just need a new roof? Do we have equipment on hand that might need to be upgraded or replaced? When would we need to do those sort of things? What's the cash impact of that? How are we going to be able to cover that? Is that something we planned for and we have a funding source that will specifically help us cover our capital expenses? Or is this something that we need to put a fundraising campaign out there in order to drive the funds for specific upgrades or replacements? And then we already talked about the reserve fund and our investments. Do we expect to pull from it because we are in a down year, or we expect significant growth in a particular year? Or do we plan to let it sit and continue to grow over time? We can move on to our strategic assumptions. So our strategic assumptions are really based on our missions and our reach. So are we expanding our missions? Do we plan to create any new programs to further our mission? Are we planning to expand our footprint to reach more customers or clients? Do we want to serve a larger population or a larger geographic area? These are all considerations we want to be thinking about every year. A lot of times we might be happy with what we're doing in the services that we provide, so we're content with what we have, but always consider how we plan to continue to move forward as our organization. I already mentioned partnerships once. I want to mention it again. So has anything changed with others around you where partnerships would make sense? Shared goals and missions can really lighten the load on any individual nonprofit. So even if you don't have all the funding you need in order to accomplish something, maybe it makes sense to reach out to another organization that has a shared mission and see if you can partner with them and split the workload and split the costs of it. The last thing for consideration is earned revenue. I've seen a lot of nonprofits have a fee for service line. A lot of times that can be done with research or other things that's aligned with your mission already, but it's kind of a fixed source of income, not fixed source of income, but it's a contract source of income. So it's not so much aligned to a cost reimbursable method, but it can actually produce surpluses as you do fee for service lines of work. And you can use those funds to cover other places. You always want to be careful with fee for service work, just to be aware of the UBIT, the unrelated business income tax on nonprofits. So as long as your fee for service line is aligned with your mission, you should be able to avoid that. But if you start doing a consulting service that's relatively unrelated to your mission, you want to consider any tax implications that might have. So that's our true assumptions that we want to look at. Now we want to consider what's our best practices to implement this, build it all, put it all into our strategic plan and move it forward. I recommend doing multiple scenarios. If you have the time and capacity to do so, you want to plan for what's the most likely outcome, what's the best thing that we could see, and what's a worst case scenario that we might run into. Just things that we want to consider. If you have the ability to build it in, I highly recommend making it a dynamic model so that you can change your assumptions with a few clicks instead of having to rebuild everything from scratch, that you can see the differences in the assumptions that you're making. If one thing doesn't fall through, how does that affect the rest of our plan or the essentially everything else that we're planning to do as an organization? We want to use separate time horizons and plan differently for each time horizon. So this is where your first year strategic plan, your 1 year strategic plan, that's pretty much your budget for the year. That's your strategic plan. For year 2, you want to have something similar to your budget, maybe build it out so that it's a monthly look at how you want to have your organization over 2 years. But when you look further out and you start thinking about 3 to 5 years in the future, just doing a general for the whole year, this is what we expect it to look at. These are the assumptions that we're making. It shouldn't be a massive lift for the 3 to 5 year plan. You should make it easy to make updates and changes to it, and have everything built in a dynamic model so that you can use drivers to make those updates for you whenever you're working on your strategic plan and remodeling it out. So using drivers, this is where you would bring your KPIs in, right? So you want to have those built into this. And when you start putting the numbers together on paper for the budget, you just want to keep an eye on, if we hit these targets, what would our KPIs look like? If we miss these targets, what would it look like? And how does that affect our decision making? Is there something that we need to change because it doesn't look good in either scenario? Whenever we need to make a change for the strategic plan, just always consider our overall mission of the organization. Is what we're working on now furthering our vision and mission for the organization? There's a lot of budgeting software out there that can help assist you with doing a longer term look at your strategic plan and actually putting numbers on paper. Consider using a solution that would fit your needs if you're not as comfortable building it out in Excel. You want to always you want to make sure that this is always a collaborative development within your organization as well. Billy mentioned and touched on this one too. When you work on your strategic plan and you involve others, it empowers them to make decisions that you can feel confident in your team to move things forward without you having to be in the nitty-gritty of everything that's going on. They know where you're headed. They know where you see the organization. They know where you want to get to, and they want to help you get there. Collaborate with them when you build this out. And it's not just your fundraising staff or your program managers, right? It's best if you get as many people involved in the initial development of it, or at least consider presenting department level plans to everyone in your organization so that they know how that department is going to be moving forward. It's always been fantastic collaboration every time I've brought other people in on it. People really enjoy being involved in planning for an organization. You want to know your audience. So when you build out your first strategic plan, you want to know who you're presenting it to. Is that going to be something we're sharing to the board? Is it something that we're just sharing with the executive team? Is it something that we want to break into a department level so that we can share it with our VPs amongst the organization? Where's this going? What do they want to see? What's important to them? Highly recommend building in some visual elements that help extrapolate the points you're trying to make and really put a nice picture to the financial model that you put together. The last thing you always want to do too is a risk assessment. I highly recommend, you did a SWOT analysis, you looked at other things, you made some SMART goals. What risks are there for your organization that might cause those things to be questionable, be iffy, right? What's the biggest things that we could have on this? Knowing that you've thought about the risks is always an important thing. And just having the vision and consideration, the forethought of what's risky for your organization can help you avoid some roadblocks in the future. So highly recommend making that a piece of its own. Lastly, we want to talk about the living document thing again. So your strategic plan is a living document. This isn't something you build out once, you put it on a shelf, you leave it there, you already talked about it, it's going to stay that same way for the next 3 years. That's really not the case. This is something that you need regular review and you need regular updates to. This thing lives and breathes. It is the template for your company. It is the roadmap to get from point A, where you are now, to point B, where you see yourself in the future. Organizations that build out a strategic plan are regularly outperforming others that don't have the forethought or the foresight to think about the future. I recommend, as long as time and capacity allows, a twice annual review for updates and changes. And by that, I would say every 6 months, maybe your financial leader or whoever owns the strategic plan creation and modeling does their own sort of review, check in on it. Does things still make sense the way we set it up? And then once a year, you do a deep dive with all of the collaboration efforts from everyone in the organization. You take a couple of weeks to put it all together. You make sure that all of your assumptions still are accurate as what you needed them to be when you first built this out. What's changed over that time? How does this look now? Now that a year has gone by, we need to add that 5th year on the back end. And the 1 year plan we need to make sure is developed into a monthly forecast instead of being a 5 year plan or just an annual numbers. Along the way, as something massive changes, highly recommend performing real-time adjustments to this. That way there, when you get to these annual reviews or semi-annual reviews, it will be a lot quicker for you to make those adjustments if you're doing it live as things change. Having a version control and maintaining previous versions of your strategic plan can also be really useful for you. Specifically, this has come across in some nonprofits I've worked with. We want to do something, but we don't want to do it now. We want to do it in 3 years from now. We'll plan for it. This is what we think it'll look like. And then next year you come along and the landscape has changed. You're not going to be able to afford to do that thing. So you take it out of the play, say, we can't do that. Maybe that's now going to happen in 6 years. Well, when you get to that later point in time, it'd be nice to look back on what you originally planned for that goal. How did it look when you first built it out? Is it something that we are in a position to perform now? Can we start implementing it and bringing it in? So having previous versions available of your strategic plan just makes future versions a little bit easier to look at and control. So I also want to take a second just to talk about Insource. And so Insource is a a la carte services. It's as needed. So what we do, we are a full department outsourcing. So we can either be short-term, long-term, part-time, or not. And our key areas that we work in is really finance, HR, IT, data solutions. We do assessments for organizations. So if you wanted to check in on your financial health of your company or just their financial team as a whole, we can help perform an assessment and let you know how things look for you. We provide training for various departments, recruiting. We have project and interim assignments. So we can do one-time work, short-term work. We can manage it. And how we do it is we seek to understand client businesses and missions. We're all experienced, expert senior account leaders. We have various client teams where we can set the right person at the right level for the right job so that we can be as cost effective as possible when we're working with everyone. And we have various expertise levels within our organization with over 175 employees. And we'll pause here for any questions. The slides will be sent out with a follow-up message from MNN.
Yes, sorry, I we'll be sending an email out to everybody as a follow-up, so just keep an eye out for that. Oh, I just got a question coming in from Marguerite. Can you speak about strategies to get a volunteer working board invested in making a strategic plan?
Yeah, I would recommend, requesting a committee from the board, letting them know that you feel you need some support from your organization or for your organization, someone that, you want to find the right expertise for what you're looking for. If your company is struggling from fundraising, maybe you reach out to a board member that is strong in fundraising and reach out to them individually first. You have the ability to do that with anyone on your board. Propose the idea to them. You're the leader of your organization. You want your board to get invested in helping build it out. What do you need? Who do you think is the right person on your board to lead that committee you would need to create? And reach out to them individually, one-on-one, have the discussion with them, see if they're interested in helping out with it. There's a lot
Yeah,
of
because if it's
success when you can meet
yeah,
one.
yeah, because if it's a subgroup of the board, usually those, like work out better rather than like the whole board. So yeah, finding who on the board can help you the most will work best.
There's a question in the
There,
chat. Do you work with Canadian organizations?
I haven't yet.
yeah,
I can't speak
I
for the
haven't
whole
yet either.
organization.
Yeah, definitely reach out.
If you reach out, we can answer that with some people that are more familiar with that line.
Yes,
Yeah, launching a capital campaign would be
campaign.
a separate webinar. That wasn't the topic we were on today.
So we just got a question in the Q&A. Could you speak more about plan layouts of software that you found useful? I've used Word documents, tables, and Kanban boards, and none of them seem to do everything. I do a lot of mine in Excel. I love Excel. Joe actually likes it even more than I do. Um, yeah, I've used Excel the most, and sometimes whatever accounting software you're using might have a module that can do budgeting as well.
I do mine in Excel, but there's programs out there like Monday is a good one from like a budgeting standpoint where it can help you do project planning. I think it also has extensions on it to do actual bigger plan layouts than just a single project.
And then what would you recommend for nonprofits that are under fiscal sponsorships?
So if you're under a fiscal sponsorship, you're a smaller nonprofit. It's really something you would do in-house with
Hmm.
your team, talk with everyone you have. The collaboration piece is even more important for you because you have boots on the ground doing everything. That's where I would start. Who's your executive director? What's the people under them? How do we build this out together? What's our mission, goals, values? Answer those questions first, and it makes building out the rest of the plan a lot easier.
Do you have suggested reading or templates for a strategic plan? How often should the plan be reviewed for performance and by who? So often, I would say, like Joe mentioned in his section, a minimum of twice a year, maybe even quarterly by the key stakeholders like a CFO or a finance manager. Um, And then obviously with the board as well. Suggesting reading or templates for strategic plans. There are budget softwares and softwares out there that you can use. I don't know what I mean. I mostly use Excel. I don't know if you have any other programs you've used, Joe.
No, I'm an Excel guy.
Yeah. Yeah, I would start with Excel, or and in talking with the finance people in your organization because they might have a template that they could use as well, like
Yeah,
based off of how you present your financials. Because that's usually what I would take is how you present your financials and start using that as a template.
yeah. If you're struggling to get started with it because you don't really know where to start, you can always reach out to Insource as well, and we'd be happy to just get you going in the right direction and set you up with a way to build it out that makes sense for
Yeah.
your specific organizational needs, and then you can take it from there.
Great. Yeah, if there are no more questions, if you do have questions, we do have some time left, but if there are no more questions, I just want to say another thank you to everyone for attending. And again, to keep an eye out for that recording and slides. And as well, I would like to say a huge thank you to our presenters. We really appreciate you joining us today and providing this information.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes, have a great rest of your day.